Well, welcome everybody. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Chris Marcinek. I'm the Maryland PPA president. And I wanted to tell you that Maryland PPA is a nonprofit, volunteer-run association for professional photographers. And we're dedicated to the artistic, technical, and business success of the professional or aspiring photographer. So if you're interested in any of those things, please see any one of us and we will help you find a way to become a member of our group. We bring great programs like the one tonight with Gary Jones, and we do this all year long. We have image competitions as well as an annual convention in April. So I'm not going to talk much more tonight. I wanted to introduce my friend George Singleton. He is a longtime Maryland PPA member, and he has a better perspective than I do on what was happening in the 1950s. And he's been kind enough to tell us about it. Thank you. He will also introduce Gary Jones at the end.
Thank you, Chris. So I have the honor of serving two functions this evening. I've been asked to introduce our speaker for the evening, Gary Jones, and I've been asked to share my experiences as an historical witness participant to the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s in the United States of America. I was raised by different groups of my father's family in multiple cities on the East Coast, primarily Washington, D.C., and Sumter, South Carolina. I was aware of and can speak to life during segregation. Segregation existed in northern cities as well as southern cities, but there were differences between northern and southern segregation. In Washington, D.C., it was nuanced. Segregation was achieved through redlining neighborhoods. African Americans could only buy or rent homes in specific neighborhoods, and their children attended schools specific to their neighborhoods. In Washington, D.C., segregation wasn't enforced 100%. There were exceptions to neighborhood segregation. Occasionally, poor white families who moved to the Washington area looking for employment could only afford to rent prices in African American neighborhoods and needed to live in our neighborhoods. Therefore, their children attended African American neighborhood schools. World War II forced necessary changes to the makeup of neighborhoods because of all the people who moved to Washington, D.C. to assist in the war effort. Some of these workers were people of color. That is how many in my family came to move from South Carolina to Washington, D.C. Marie Ethel Singleton, my father's oldest sister, answered the nation's call for help with the war effort. Marie Singleton moved her younger sister, Hattie Bell, and their mother, Hattie Singleton, to Washington, D.C. Marie worked for the War Department in the Quartermaster Division of the U.S. Army, arranging for the acquisition and shipping of material and supplies to the European stage. She worked in an integrated office. She and several branches of the Singleton family moved into formerly white neighborhoods as white flight to the suburbs began. I was orphaned when my natural mother died in childbirth with me. My father buried my mother and moved with my sister and brother back to his hometown, Sumter, South Carolina. After much discussion between my mother's family, the Medleys, and my father's family, the Singletons, Marie, Hattie Bell, and Hattie Singleton agreed to take me in. I was moved to Washington, D.C. when I was 3 months old. When I was 2 years old, my grandmother took me on a trip to South Carolina to visit family. We went by train. That trip was my first experience with steam locomotives. When we boarded the train at Union Station in Washington, D.C., heading south, we could sit anywhere we wanted. With a steam locomotive, it was necessary to load more water and coal every 3 to 4 hours. At some changeover during the trip to South Carolina, everyone had to get off the train with all their belongings. Once the locomotive had been serviced and a new crew took over, when we reboarded the train at the direction of the conductor, the train was then segregated. We visited family in Sumter, South Carolina. We took a bus to Columbia, South Carolina for more family visits. I can remember sitting in the very back of the bus. I had a box of animal crackers. I dropped my box on the floor of the bus. My grandmother would not let me have any more of the crackers because she said the floor was dirty and full of germs. Back in Washington, D.C., lunch counters were segregated. After my grandmother's death, my daycare was provided by a cousin's wife, Miss Alice. Joseph Singleton and his wife, Alice Singleton, owned a boarding house. Miss Alice provided after-school care for me and another orphan boy, Robert Valentine. I remember one occasion when boarders were late paying their rent. Cousin Joe and Miss Alice were down to the wire with making a Washington Gas payment. One day, Miss Alice loaded Robert and me in a wagon with a packed lunch. We made our way downtown to pay the gas bill in person. We had PB&J sandwiches in Meridian Park. At the time, I thought it was just a great wagon ride. I was maybe 3 or 4. Later, I learned that we couldn't have had a meal at Murphy's Five and Dime on 14th Street, nor anywhere in the downtown area. So the PB&J sandwiches were a way to keep from going hungry as she cared for us and paid the bill. I began first grade in Washington, D.C. in 1952 when I was 6 years old. The momentous Supreme Court case, Brown v. Board of Education, began in December of that year. I spent the first half of my second grade in Washington, then moved to live with my Aunt Gladiola McDaniel and her family in Sumter, South Carolina. Aunt Gladiola, Mrs. McDaniel, was a first grade teacher at Savage Glover Elementary, where I was enrolled for the second semester of my second grade in 1954. The Supreme Court declared school segregation to be unconstitutional in May 1954, the end of my second grade school year. During the school spring semester, I was aware of the excitement people felt as we awaited the decision. In Sumter, people at the school thought since I was from Washington, I must have had knowledge of the case before the Supreme Court. Being 7 years old at the time, it was news to me. In January 1954, on my first day attending Savage Glover Elementary in Sumter, the school secretary took me to the closet where books were stored. As I, at 7 years old, stood there with her, I could see all the books in the closet were tattered and worn. When she handed me my textbook, I asked her, "Don't you have a new one for me?" She said, these were the books for Savage Glover students. These books originally were used by the white students of Sumter. Once these books were deemed unusable, newer editions were purchased and shipped to the white schools, and the old books were moved to the African American schools. Book backs were often broken, and some of the pages were torn or missing. Some books had answers written in by white students. Often as a joke, I suppose, wrong answers were written in the textbooks. Another early lesson that I learned at Savage Glover was on the playground during recess. When I was taken in by Marie, Hattie Bell, and their mother, Hattie, I thought Marie and Hattie Bell were my older sisters, so I called them by their first names. I thought their mother, Hattie, was my mother. During one recess in my first week at Savage Glover, I saw my aunt on the playground. I went up to her and I said, "Gladiola." And with fire breathing, she told me in no uncertain terms that I was to address her as Mrs. McDaniel or Aunt Gladiola. Aunt Gladiola was so proud to be a war bride. Her husband, Linus McDaniel, served in World War II in the U.S. Army as a cook. After the war, Uncle Linus became a much sought-after chef in the hotel restaurant industry in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Sumter, South Carolina. He generally worked where the tips were best, mostly in Myrtle Beach at the height of the tourist season. Other times he was chef in the Holiday Inn restaurant in Sumter. Uncle Linus introduced me to one of my favorite culinary delights, fried shrimp. He also prepared game from his hunting and fishing, primarily squirrel, rabbit, and catfish. In one of his war stories, Uncle Linus told us of one of his visits into the Italian town near his base. He said, at first, the townsfolk were looking at his butt. They kept wandering around him, and he was wondering why. Finally, they told him that the white soldiers had told them that the black soldiers had tails like monkeys. When I first joined Aunt Gladiola and her family, we lived in a project which was built for veterans of the war and their families. In Sumter, the housing development had a chain-link fence down the middle. White families lived on one side of the fence, and African-American families lived on the other side. One of my errands was to take the rent check to the office, which was on the white side. My instructions were to say nothing, touch nothing, say yes, ma'am, if necessary, give them the check, and come straight home. One of the toys that I was allowed to take with me from Washington was an Indian costume, which I loved. Concerning the Lone Ranger, I identified with Tonto. I had no idea that when playing cowboys and Indians, I could end up being shot. One of the white boys shot me with his Daisy rifle. My costume was pretty thick, so the BB just bounced off my wrist. It still hurt, and it got my attention. The housing development was far from the school where Aunt Gladiola taught and where I was attending, so we soon moved closer to Savage Glover and closer to Emmanuel Methodist Episcopal Church, where she was the church organist. When we moved to our new neighborhood, the streets weren't paved, and the electrical power was just strong enough to run lights. This was sometime in 1955. Either in the spring of 1954 or 55, the school put on a play about the Easter Bunny. They had me recite my lines over the school intercom. They wanted the other students to hear how well I spoke and enunciated my words. Marie Singleton had been a high school English teacher before she moved to Washington. She brought me up with proper English diction and grammar. In the summer of 1955, Aunt Marie sent for me and my cousin Reginald McDaniel to visit her in Washington, D.C. It may have been while Reggie and I were visiting in Washington that Emmett Till was murdered. When Reggie and I returned to Sumter, it seemed that we got a lot of lectures for our safety and danger awareness. We were told stories of the KKK riding up onto people's front porches and dragging people out to hang them or burn houses down. We had a small porch, and it was terrifying for a 7 or 8 year old to think someone could ride up on a horse and burn the house down. We had more lectures about being careful of what and how we said anything. Because of my proper English diction, they feared I would be targeted as someone from the North. On one occasion, Aunt Gladiola took Reggie and me downtown. We were riding in a taxi driven by a white cab driver. Aunt Gladiola told us to not look into the eyes of the driver, or he would spit tobacco into our eyes and put our eyes out. When I was 9 years old, living with Aunt Gladiola and her family in Sumter, Rosa Parks took her historic bus ride in Montgomery, Alabama, on December 1st, 1955. After all the trauma of Emmett Till's murder and the bravery of his mother to insist on an open casket funeral so all could really see the horror of Jim Crow, Rosa Parks' bravery was an awakening to the fight ahead, a fight that is not over. In imaging competition, we talk about impact as one of the 12 elements that makes for a merit image. During a Professional Photographer Society of Greater Washington print competition, upon seeing Gary's photograph of his mother sitting in that bus, all of the visceral feelings of the 1950s hit me. That was impact. A native of Petersburg, Virginia, and graduate of Virginia State University, Gary D. Jones earned the designation Certified Professional Photographer. His photographic journey began when his mother gifted him with a Pentax K1000. He loves mentoring and teaching other photographers the art of photography. Gary is a member of the Professional Photographers of America and PPA Community Partners, PPSGW, Professional Photographers of North Carolina, and Multicultural Association of Professional Photographers. Gary has served on the Professional Photographers of America National Council, representing the District of Columbia. Gary's honors and awards include the PPNC Fellowship of Photography degree, first place and judges awards in PPSGW and PPNC print competitions, the prestigious 2024 PPA Diamond Award, which included a $1,000 check, and the PPA 2024 Grand Imaging Award, which included a $10,000 check. It is my pleasure to introduce my friend and fellow photographer, Gary Jones.
Thank you, George. Appreciate that. Really do. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. One thing I want to say, thank you, MD PPA, for allowing me to come and talk about tonight my winning of the GIA over there, the Grand Imaging Award. As George was saying earlier, this image of my mother on the bus was something that had been in my mind for several years. And through a lot of trial and error, finally got it. Did I expect to win the GIA? No. When it made it to the round of 32, if it did not make it out that round, I would have got a bronze medal, which I would have been perfectly happy with. But it went a little further, and a little further, and a little further. Then I'm on the stage, and when they announced the winner of the 2024 Grand Imaging Award, and the crowd went crazy, I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't know I won yet. If you look at the video, you'll see me lean slightly forward because we couldn't see the screen. And then I was like, oh my God, it's mine. So tonight, I'm gonna take you through a little background about me and how the concept of this image came to be. So, it's the evolution of an image from concept to GIA winner. The image of my mother on the bus is called The Destination Ahead. And it earned me the Diamond Award in the Natural Portrait category. And of course, it earned me the Grand Imaging Award. Yeah. Oh, use the bigger one?
You can hold it if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, I'll be
You just
better.
can't go in front of that.
No, don't worry, I won't. Is that better? Ooh, that's a lot better. Okay, I guess this mic's not working, so.
No, it's the little ones to the camera, that's for the people.
Okay. Okay, a little bit about, oh, do you need to bring the lights down a little bit?
Can everybody see?
Oh, I can see that.
Y'all can see? Okay. Okay, a little bit about me. I'm from Petersburg, Virginia. Small city south of Richmond. If you ever went to Atlanta on I-85, you must travel through Petersburg. I went to Virginia State University, got a Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree in Commercial Art and Design. Commercial Art and Design is the forerunner to graphic art. Graphic arts, you generally do everything on computer. Commercial Art and Design, you did everything by hand, from the thumbnail to the final. One of the hardest majors I ever went through, but it was a great major. Also, I've been a member, not a member, but I have worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs for 37 years. So I do serve the veteran best way I can. It's been, I've worked at what used to be the Washington Regional Office, but I'm still at that building. My station is now virtual, so most of my employees are scattered all over the country, but we, in our small office, still support them. I'm in Support Services Division, and the slogan that we used to have is, we take care of the employees that serve the veteran. That's our job. I've been a member of PPA for 19 years. Now, when I first joined PPA in 2005, I really joined PPA to say that I belong to a professional organization. Went through a few of their conventions up to 2008, stopped for about 10 years, started back up in 2018, and I had an epiphany. This is a serious organization. I need to step in line and get more serious. My print competition started from there. And also I've been a PPA counselor for the District of Columbia. I am now waiting on the results of the election for my third term. Should I win again, this will also be my last term. For those who may not know what being a PPA counselor is, it's like being a member of the House of Representatives. We represent our state or our city, and once a year we have our meeting at the convention where we talk about issues. When I first got on council, the big issue at the time was the wedding degree. And I voted for it, so now you have a fourth degree that you can apply for with PPA, the Master of Wedding Photography. This is where I grew up. This is my grandmother's house in Petersburg, Virginia, 125 Blank Alley. She and my grandfather moved into Petersburg in 1948. He was a soldier. He was stationed at what was then known as Camp Lee, not Fort Lee yet. Now it's known as Fort Gregg Adams because they changed the name to it. Simple house. We didn't have hot and cold running water, generally cold. Our heat came from a wood stove, or a couple of them in the house, but it was home. One of the things that I wish I could have had done when I was younger would take more pictures, but I wasn't a photographer yet. All the memories I have is up here. And I think I just jumped ahead of myself. Yeah. Now don't laugh at this picture. This is the only picture I have of my youth. I was first grade, 6 years old. That's one of the reasons I became a photographer. I have no baby pictures. The only baby pictures that they had, the only one that they had a crease going right down the middle of it. So I still didn't know what I looked like.
I know a restoration photographer that could probably...
Well, unfortunately, that picture got stolen by my great aunt many years ago. And that was a common thing with country folk. You'll go visit someone's house, there's a picture you want, you just took it. That's what it was. So it was no family photos either. So I don't have any Christmas photos or my birthday photos, none of that. Everything is right up here in my head. Why the bus? Now, as you can see in the caption, taken with a Polaroid camera in 1979. and it looks terrible. But at the time, it was a Polaroid. It was a good picture. My uncle gave me an old beat-up Polaroid, something to play with after he got out the military. And like I had the question, why the bus? That was our primary source of transportation. We didn't have a car. We couldn't rely on friends to take us downtown. Either we used our feet, caught the bus, or called a cab, or even called a gypsy cab from the local Safeway. So I became attached to these vehicles. I remember this particular model here. These were from the 60s, and they got retired in the early 80s. But I remember the Pepsi-Cola top on the front. I remember when you pulled it, it was the buzzer. And I also remember the fare boxes. You put the coins in, you crank the box, and you could hear it counting the coins inside the box. But, from the sounds of it, some of y'all remember those too. So I became attached to this vehicle, and I still am today. The picture that y'all see of my mother is from a bus. Some people say, why buses? Because it's still a classic vehicle. These here are classics. There's not too many of them still around, but they still roll around different cities. Some cities kept some old ones. After they retired the fleet, they kept some. So when you're on the road, especially traveling through the city, and a bus is blocking your path, or you're getting upset with it because it's not going fast enough for you so you can get around it, just remember, there's a lot of people that rely on that for their only transportation. Okay, the concept. You're about to see the concept that I used to create the last image that won the GIA. Now, originally, I had a personal project called Back of the Bus. And the idea of this project was to shoot various things in the back of a bus. Now, I had the wild ideas of like getting the gospel choir to sing in the back of the bus, have a drummer in the back of the bus, have someone shooting hoops in the back of the bus. Unfortunately, that project never materialized because, one, I couldn't get a bus. Metro was very hard on me when I kept asking, can I go to the yard where Metro buses go to die? Because that would have been the perfect place to do some of this. So, couldn't get a bus, never happened. But wanting to do that concept is what led me to the photo that you saw. This was the first one, 2017. Now, all these bus photos was taken at the Museum of Bus Transportation, Hershey, Pennsylvania. They actually have a museum there for antique cars as well as buses. The bus from Forrest Gump is actually housed there. And they do bring it out. Once a year, they have an event called the Bus Spring Fling, where the museum pulls out their buses, plus if you happen to own a city bus or in a city bus, you can bring it with you and show it off. So it's like a car show, but for buses. So, and where this bus is stored, it's a maintenance yard. The buses are put there first to get rehabbed, and then they'll go to the museum. So once a year, we're allowed to go to the yard to walk around and look at these buses. Now this particular one, this was the first attempt. I judged it, had it judged at PPNC, their print competition, and it got me a 79. Now I know people talk about Club 79, but for me, this was the first image I ever put in. So getting a 79 to me was exciting because it showed that I do have what it takes to go further with it. So I just use that for inspiration more than anything else. This particular bus did not work. It is It's a flexible. It was a little bit too wide, and the angle I shot this just didn't work. Just didn't work out. And then the original name I had named it was called Waiting. But you can see I had my mother still roughly in the area where the emergency door is. I have her looking out of the bus, and that one she kind of had a smug look on her face, but you know, at that time it was fine for me. But I just couldn't make this one work the way I wanted. And some of the suggestions I had gotten critiques was to crop it a little bit closer, and then to give it a name like, you know, Waiting for Her Love and all that stuff. I'm like, no, she's sitting on a bus, so she's not waiting for anybody. This was concept number 2. Second attempt, never used it. Why I never used it? As soon as I got home, I realized I hated it. But it's on the bus that I used for the next time. This one here, as you can see, it's all running the same pattern. She's near the emergency door, closer to the back. I still felt I got too much bus in this picture, and then her expression was just still a little bit too happy. So, but the lighting is about the same. Lighting was hit from the rear of the bus. The bus was sitting next to a grayish-white wall, which reflected the light back into it. None of the pictures of any of the photos I took of my mother on the bus was taken with natural light only. I did not use a flash. I did not use a strobe. I did not use any light. I didn't use a reflector except for the wall itself. That was the natural reflector. Okay, third attempt. 2022, finally got it. We went on board the same bus again, and I told my mother, get into similar seat, and I just said, relax your face. And this time, that's what she did. And so I shot about 10 to 12 shots of it, and then took it home, dropped it in Lightroom, ran a few of them through black and white, and it was like, got it. That's the one I wanted. Now, I took this picture in June of 22. I still had time to enter it in the IPC. I decided not to. I said, let me see what it does in the States. Then I'll send it in. But I won't tell you what it scored yet, but I'll let you know. Okay, and this is the final version along with the 3 originals. As you can see, the only change I really made to it was change it from a color to a black and white. I didn't do any Photoshop on it. Okay, a little harder. Okay, now, hold on, I lost my mic, wait a minute. How many of you saw the video of me winning the GIA? You were there, so I know. Okay, cool. Now, so you know, when I was on stage, I couldn't even show an emotion. I was just shocked. Like I said, we'll go into more of that a little bit later. But it has opened a world of opportunities for me. That's why I had this slide named Life After the GIA, because so many opportunities open up. Like, for example, my presentation to MAP, they gave me a standing hugvation, where I mean every person in the meeting came and gave me a hug, because they was just so proud of me. I had people come up to me the night after the ceremony. We went to the hotel restaurant to eat. So there was one gentleman in there who came up to our table and he said, "Excuse me, sir, I have a person in the back who wants to meet you, but he has a boot on his leg and he can't walk that well. I was like, okay, no problem. So me and my mother, we walked back there. Soon as we got to the rear of the restaurant, it exploded. Cheers, hollers, everything you can think of. I'm sitting up there doing the princess way, because I didn't know what else to do. But it was so many people came up to me and my mother, because the night of the ceremony, she was wearing that same dress. And some people in the audience started noticing it. They said, wait a minute, that's the woman on the bus picture. And so they was cheering her just as much as they was cheering me. And even that night, we were in the room and we had a thermostat that had a night light on it. And I kept wondering why the ceiling kept lighting up. Not paying attention to my phone blew up the whole night. Friends, family, Eric, congrats, Gary. Man, you made it. Good job, all this. So it was, and even to this day, months after it, sometimes I still don't believe I won it. Even when I look at those two crystal children, sometimes I don't believe I won it. Because I am a member of PPA, but I'm not a well-known one. I've been a member close to 20 years, but I'm virtually unknown. And some of the images I beat, I know those photographers. Those I consider the big dogs of the industry. I'm just a little pup, but the pup beat the dogs. And, you know, it's a humbling thing because, well, let me go on. Because I don't get a little emotional, but when I get near the end, I'll finish it. So I had an interview with PPA the next day, also with an individual named Braxton Holly. He is a photographer down in Alabama, and we did an interview. Acknowledges from all the groups, PPSGW, VPPA, MDPPA, and PPNC. But one of the proudest moments I had was when I had a reporter from my hometown newspaper, the Progress Index, call me for an interview. Then not only that happened, but as you can see, in February 15th, let me get the pointer, right here, it was on the front page of the paper. And it was just a total shock, but I had a lot of pride because it's my hometown. And I was raised in a neighborhood called Blandford, which is a section of Petersburg. And it's not the richest neighborhood. And a lot of young men my age either had two choices, or three: jail, military, or death. And I proved that a boy from Blandford can do good. And I came home. And even though I left Petersburg at the age of 9, my grandmother, every holiday, every summer, I was on that next Trailways bus heading down to Petersburg. And until we had to demolish her house in 1996 because the city had condemned it, and she moved to Washington until she passed in 2004. It was home. We still own the property, so even though the house is not there, when I enter the land, I know I'm home. And so that was the proudest moment. And then next to it, here, my image ended up in several newsletters. My VA newsletter, but this one, the newsletter for my ward, which I live in Ward 5 in Washington. And then, but this one here came from my mother's high school association, Peabody High School. When we talk about, as George was talking about segregation, there was only 2 high schools in Petersburg. One was black, one was white. Petersburg High School was white, Peabody High School was black. And that was the high school that she went to. Now, also, my mother and my grandmother are both from Georgia, Sparta, Georgia. When she moved up here, they, because of the rules that they had at the time, she was purposely kept back a year. So she graduated older than most of the students that she graduated with. Now, the funny part is that when I moved to Washington, they wanted me to advance me a year because I was in third grade I was going to the fourth grade in D.C., but I was reading on the sixth grade level. They wanted to put me in fifth grade. My mother said, no, let him go through the cycle. And I appreciate that because if I had got there a little bit earlier, two of my best friends who I've been friends with for nearly 50 years, I would have never met. So I appreciate that part. And last one here, last week, the Petersburg Area Art League. Right now, I have a photo exhibit there with, of course, this picture as the lead photo, but the rest of the photos there are of images of Petersburg, town that I grew up in. And that was also a great experience because, like I said, I was able to come back home. So that opened last Friday, and then that Saturday, now mind you, I'm coming back from a week of East Coast school in Durham, North Carolina. So even before I could come home to Washington, I had to stop in Petersburg. So that Friday night, the show opened. That Saturday, WRIC ABC 8 came to interview me. So this will be the first time I've been on television since I was 9 years old, when I was interviewed by J.C. Hayward at my elementary school, Truesdale Elementary. So that's another great point that happened. Then, of course, the presentation I'm doing with you tonight, which you are my first official PPA speaking engagement. So now I was working on my master's, but now because I spoke here, now I got to work on my craftsman's as well.
There you go.
And thank you very much for that. And in July's edition, they will have all the diamonds with a little description in the picture. Since I have the GIA, I am hoping for the cover. If I do get it, you will hear a scream bigger than anything. So keep your fingers crossed. Next month it will show. Okay, one of the things I did was to go back to that bus museum with the photograph that won the GIA and get back on the actual bus. The bus you see is right there. Mom is sitting in the same seat, holding the photograph. And then after that, that picture was turned over to the Museum of Bus Transportation. So now they were thrilled when I told them the history of it, how it went through. They was just ecstatic. So now that picture is a permanent part of their collection. Okay, right here is the photo exhibit. And hold on a sec. I'm gonna put this down. I hope I don't make it too loud. Okay, so far so good. Okay, these are the posters that they use to advertise the event. So they're all over Petersburg right now. It's a two shows. This, of course, is not mine. I don't do quilts, so this, of course, is not mine. But the top one is, and we had our reception last Friday, and the show will be up until August the 3rd. So if y'all want to make a trip down to Petersburg, it's only 2.5 hours from D.C., and it's got a great restaurant next to it called the Crocus Pie. Okay. Now, Let me give you a quick description of the area. And also, this was the postcard that they sent out. So I have both. Now, where the Art League is, who saw the movie Lincoln back in around 2011, 2012? Okay. Okay, Washington, D.C., in that movie is Old Town Petersburg. So a lot of the buildings, go back and look at the movie. And if you go down there, you will see all those buildings. And once in a while, I take friends down and I do what they call the Lincoln tour. I said, this building was there, that building was there. The building where the Croker Spot is now, it used to be known as the Farmers Market. In the movie, it was General Grant's headquarters. It's a very historic town, founded in 1748. And like I said, it sits on two major interstates, 95 and 85. It's been going through some economic hard times now, but it's slowly coming back. So I used to always tell people, if you go down North Carolina or down south, go to Petersburg. Buy gum, buy gas, buy anything, because they need the money. But it's a good little town, and it's slowly coming back after all these years. Okay, this is my interview with WRC ABC 8. Originally, that station was in Petersburg. Matter of fact, I could see it from our property when they built it. And it was known, its call letters back then was known as WXEX, Channel 8, before they closed it and moved everything to Richmond. The building is still there, but they use it as a counseling building now. But the antenna is also still there. So as you can see, her equipment was a Canon 7D and an iPhone. Big change from the old big honking cameras that they used to carry. Okay, coming to the end. Now, as I had said earlier, before I put in I could have put in the IPC in 2022. I decided not to. I decided let it run its course through the states, see what happens. So for PPSGW, which is located in DC, it scored a perfect 100. In PPNC, which is in North Carolina, it scored a 92. In PPA of PA, which is of course in Pennsylvania, it scored an 87. Some of my friends had asked me, aren't you upset because it scored 87? I'm like, no, it scored 100. I'm happy with that. Now, one thing I can tell you, even though the score is different in range, I never altered that picture. What they saw is what they got. So I never changed it. Now, after the state competitions, it went to the MIR, Image Excellence. They got the Image Excellence Award. Then the road to the IPC. Of course, it was 1,600 images entered. 500 made the cut. It was 16 categories, 32 in each category. Now, the judging, I had got an email when it made it to the round of 32. And then we will be told later what to do if it goes further. So on the way to Louisville, they judged it. So I didn't know the results till I got there. So when we got to near to the hotel, I couldn't find it. So I got on email to get the address to it. And one of my friends had emailed me, congratulations, Gary, you made it to the Final Four. What?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, everyone. My name is Constance. I rode with Gary and his mother to this event. So we're trying to find the hotel, and I'm driving, and all of a sudden, he screams.
Yep.
In the car. I thought something happened to his mom. I thought, something had, happened like a pain or something. He goes, I need to find a hotel. Okay, Gary, this is great, but I'm trying to find
Well, obviously you can see how excited I was. So then On that Monday night, this is when they had, the final judgings. So when all the final four had to go to the back of the auditorium, and we had to sit there and wait until the competition started. Everybody else is back there. Hold on, let me move this so y'all can see. Everybody else in the back was laughing, joking, taking selfies, all that stuff, high-fiving each other. This is me. So one of the people asked me, "What's wrong?" And I said, "This is my first time entering the IPC. I'm scared." Even that morning, I called one of my friends back in D.C. and I said, "Tonight's the final judging. I'm scared." He said, "Gary, you got this. Don't be. You got it." So they did the judging in alphabetical order. So when Natural Portrait came up and the 4 images popped up, my image came up first against the color image. Knocked it out. Then a black and white came up against the other color image. Knocked it out. Then it came to the 2 black and whites. I beat that black and white of a man sitting at the piano, and I do know the person who made it because he's a good friend of mine. I beat it 3-2. That was the closest. When I first saw that image online, I was fearful. I said, you know what? This is possibly the only image that can knock mine out. And it came close. But I moved on. So I won the diamond. Now, I'll be honest with you. When I won the diamond, and what happens after you win, they immediately print an image and give to you, and then you go sit in another section. I broke down and cried. Because, like I said, if I didn't make out the bronze category, I've been perfectly happy because I would have got a little bronze pin. I've been happy with it. But then I was told I made it to the final 4. So then I'm saying, okay, if I don't make out the final 4, what's that, a platinum? Okay, I can live with that. But when I got the diamond, it was like, my God, I've done it. And I broke down, I cried right there. So then after they did all the diamond awards, they took all 16 of us, took us to the backstage, behind the stage. And so it was like a whole production back there. People running back and forth, doing different things. But there was this one little bitty screen that all of us were sitting there looking at. And so as they start going through the motions, as my image came up, it knocked out the next one. Came up again, it knocked it out. There was one image there, and for those who saw it, y'all know what I'm talking about. It was of a man or a father holding his either very sick or dying son. When that image came up against mine, you heard the crowd go, "Oh, that's not fair." And I'm sitting there like, if it gets past this one, I may have a shot at this. And I knew who created that image too. She's a good friend of mine. It beat it 4-1. So it kept going up, and then finally, the MC, Boo Ray Perry, asked Rich Newell, who was the coordinator, "Are we at the end yet?" And he said, "I think so." And then myself and this other young lady, we looked at each other like, we're it. We're the last 2. And so they called all of us up on stage to give us our trophies, give us our little diamond awards. And so they had already voted, but they would not release the vote until. So then, after all the diamonds was presented, they called the 2 of us to the front of the stage. And then Boo Ray made the announcement, the winner of the 2024 Grand Imaging Award is beep, 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 beep. And all of a sudden the crowd just blew up. Screaming, hollering. I could hear my name called in a few cases. At first, I heard my name, but it hadn't registered yet. And then that's why you see me lean and look up. And when I saw the black and white, I'm like, oh my God, it's mine. And then here come Kara Derryberry holding the $10,000 check. And then another young lady had the GIA, and I didn't even hold that one yet. I was still hanging on to the diamond. But you know, you're getting so many cheers, and I'm sitting up there. Should I pump my fist? Should I hop up and down? What do I do? You know, because one of the things that I posted on the last part, when they moved to this, you know, when they separated the MIR from the IPC and offered cash, I'm the first one. Now everybody has to follow me. So it's still, and you can see how I pause because, you know, I can't believe I won this. I cannot believe it. There's a lot of photographers who have had enough gold around their necks to make Mr. T look jealous. And I'm up here with this little bit of stuff here. I mean, I'm proud of it, but it's not a lot. Not yet. It's coming. And to sit there, and as you can see on stage, I was generally the biggest person up there. So I'm like, what is this giant doing? I looked at the videos afterwards. What's this giant on stage winning this thing? But it's a great feeling because what I told people afterward, and someone mentioned it here today about them treating it like the Stanley Cup. That's my idea. There's a lot of GIAs before me that are probably sitting on the shelf somewhere collecting dust. That I promised to myself and to my friends, that one wasn't. People was going to see it. They was going to touch it. If they want to take pictures with it, I don't care. Because I've been a photographer 43 years now. And I had a lot of inspiration. I had a lot of friends who backed me, even on the times I wanted to give up. My mother, I credit my mother for giving me my first camera, my first serious camera, Pentax K1000, because I wanted something nice to take on my senior class trip. If anybody told me from that day to this day I would have had that, I would say they were lying. Because it's been a tough road. It has not been easy. I went from film to digital, and I still shoot film, by the way. But I had friends, I had colleagues, I had strangers that kept pushing me. I said, that trophy I did not get by myself. I got it through help. I got it through inspiration. I got it for someone kicking me in the butt and said, Gary, keep going. It's been 40 years. Some of my friends said, you know, it's due. You finally got it. Yes, I paid my dues. I went through an age of photography where there wasn't no YouTube. There's very few videos then. And a lot of people didn't want to tell you anything. You had to learn for yourself. You had to learn through books, videos. Photovision was in its infant stages then. I looked at that a whole lot. And there's a friend, she worked with me at the VA. Her name is Judith Chandler. I don't know where she is now, but we became good friends while we were working. And she was a photographer and did some beautiful black and white work. And one thing she used to say to me, she said, Gary, I'll never be recognized as a photographer because I'm a woman. And when I got that trophy, she ran across my mind. Because looking in here, she had been totally proud to see all these women in here. Because back then, she felt because she was a woman, she was a black woman, but she felt more that because she was a woman, she would not be recognized. I don't know where she is now, but I wish she was there that night to see me get that. And a lot of people have come up to me, you know, a lot of young black photographers, they say, Gary, we're just proud of you. I don't know what doors I opened, I don't know. But I did it by doing. They saw. That's all I want people. I want, like people inspired me when I was first going through this, I hope that I can inspire someone else. And that's why the GIA and the diamond goes out. Yeah, the box that the GIA's in is wearing out big time. And I have a little cart over there that they ride in. But as long, you know, to go from an unknown photographer to PPA's top photographer for 1 year, that's a lot. To some, that's a burden. To me, it's a learning experience. Because I'm going to take what I know and spread it as much as I can. And I am proud that I don't know if I'm the first one from the East Coast, but I am proud to come here and let y'all see it. I'm proud to go anywhere because it's an honor more than I could ever imagine. Because, yes, I won state trophies, and that's fine. But to win that one, especially to a photographer who's not known in PPA's lineup. I mean, I'm a counselor. I've been a counselor for 6 years so far. I'm still not that well known. Everybody who knows me by my hats. And I went a lot through After Dark using After Dark and Light Pro. So a lot of people got to know me because of my hats. But still, it is. I still look at that thing. That night after the awards, we had to go in the hallway, take pictures, because Sony sponsored it. So Sony wanted their pictures, and then PPA took theirs. There's a picture of me holding that trophy with one hand. That had to be adrenaline. Because to this day, I have not been able to hold that thing with one hand. When Rich told me, he said, one thing, don't drop it. I said, no, I'm definitely not going to drop it. He said, I hope you don't have a problem getting it on the plane, because I had that plus that big paper check that I had to carry with me. And I'm like, no, we driving. He said, okay, fine, you good. But, you know, just all the accolades and people coming up to me, or my mother. In some cases, she got more popular than I did. Because, oh, you're the woman that's on that bus picture. Now, one thing, and I'll end it after this. I had two groups of thought when people approached me. The first one, it reminds them of the Rosa Parks picture. Now, that picture is iconic. It can never be duplicated. And so I wasn't going for that goal, but a lot of people seen that. Now, I did want to get an older bus because the windows of the rear would kind of tell you where that age of that bus was. But the other train of thought I received was that this is the first time in a very long time that the GIA was won by a real photograph. No Photoshop. There's no Photoshop in there. Only use Lightroom to change it from color to black and white. That was it. And judges came to me, members of PPA's board came to me and told me that same thing. And also one young lady came to me and she said, I hope, because she said this picture needs to be broadcast all over the place. But she said, I hope that this photo will change the tide with photography, where photographers come out and shoot more real pictures and less relying on Photoshop.
Amen.
And there was one argument at the bar. The picture I beat was called Red Light District. And the argument, now, the story came back to me later, but the argument was that the red light district should have been the destination ahead. And one photographer told him this. He said, in 10 years, the red light district's gonna look ridiculous. That picture will last for the next 100. So it still has a few more rounds to go in terms of speaking and showing it to people. And next year when we're in Dallas, I will be in that audience because I want to see the one who comes after me. And I want to go get up, shake their hand, and congratulate them. The GIA is the epitome of awards in PPA. And I was blessed to get it. With that, I'm done.